Hi, everybody. Got it. Recording in progress. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us once again here on a Monday night for our Let's Paint live class in the Michaels Community Classroom. Tonight we have Chris joining us, and she's going to be doing a fun Rudolph painting. If you all have done a class with Chris before, you know how fun it is. She's a great painter, a great teacher. You'll always learn something new and a great way to some great techniques to complete your paintings. So it's going to be a lot of fun. As always, I like to remind people that the pace is not right for everyone sometimes. So if it does feel like she's going a little bit fast, it's just because we're trying to get done in an hour. So you can always access the recording, so you can just sit and enjoy and just follow along, and then go back and access the recording later and paint along at that time. So I've got the chat open. Any questions, feel free to put them in there and I will do my best to answer them or pass them along to Chris. And that's it. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Chris.
Oh, that sounds great. Thank you all. And thank you for joining. When we were doing our opening messages a moment ago, I was kind of looking at my monitor screen off to my right here. And I recognized so many names coming in, some of our regular painters that are joining us in class every week. And I just so enjoy seeing you all come and support us. And thank you for attending tonight. Tonight is going to be all about whimsy, and we're going to have a very fun time doing a very cute, very, very simple little Rudolph. And before we begin, this is the actual project tonight. I did mine on a 5x7 stretched canvas, but I want to share with you that this same pattern will also work on a 5x7 note card. If any of you like to paint greeting cards, this blank note card measures 5x7, and Rudolph can be painted on the 5x7 blank note card as well, if you are still painting a few greeting cards here to hand out. And then of course you can adorn the envelope too if you like. So what a cute little card this would be to put in the mail or hand to someone special. So keep that in mind if you ever want to paint this project again. But this little cute Rudolph is what we're going to get going on tonight. So let's go ahead and just jump right in. We can go to the overhead camera now. Thank you for joining us. And I just want to make sure that everyone can see both my finished piece as well as my canvas here. This is a blank 5x7 artist stretched canvas. And you all have the pattern in the supply list. When you get the pattern, you're going to go ahead and print it out on your home printer. And my printer here at the office is right now kind of somewhat on the blink. So forgive the poor printer quality here, but it's going to print out something like this. And what I like to do is I like to take my pattern and trace it onto tracing paper first. And then I will position it over on top of the surface from where I want to apply that design. And then I will use artist transfer paper, which is also called gray graphite paper. There's a business side or a darker side and a more matte side. You're going to place that dark side down onto your surface, sandwiching it between your pattern and your canvas. I like to use a stylus, tracing over all of these pattern lines. And this artist carbon paper is going to transfer that design directly onto the canvas for you. Now, I did have a couple people reach out to me today through our Let's Paint with Plaid community, Facebook community, and they said that they felt their pattern, once it was printed on their home printer, was slightly different than the 5x7 canvas. So let me just tell you, if you are just watching with me tonight and you haven't transferred your pattern yet, maybe you're going to paint with me later, the best thing to do is to take a ruler, and this little border that you see all the way around the canvas here is simply just 1/4 of an inch from the edge into that little painted line. Let me bring it up so you can see closer. This is simply just 1/4 of an inch. So if you want to take your ruler and just mark a couple places along the side of the canvas, 1/4 of an inch, and then draw a line down. Once you get that border on here, and mine's very faint because I didn't want to put mine on too dark, but you can see that I've got a border transferred around on my canvas. Once you transfer or mark off that 1/4 inch and then draw that line, then all you have to do is just kind of center your little Rudolph character in the middle. So if that makes it a little bit easier for you, if your pattern didn't print out the correct size, I suggest you doing it that way. So I've got mine all ready to go here. And as I showed you, I'm sorry,
Chris,
do we have a question?
Yeah, I do. One of the, Donna had said that sometimes when she's using transfer paper, it tends to mark up the canvas or the note card. I mean, I'm guessing she means smudge it or with lines that she doesn't want. Do you have any idea how to avoid that?
Okay, yes, I do. And Donna, that's always a very good question. I'm assuming you might be working with a brand new sheet of graphite paper or carbon paper. This is an artist carbon paper, not to be confused with like typewriter carbon paper. With this gray graphite or artist carbon paper, mine, as you can see here, is very, very well used, very well loved. And so mine will always give me a very faint transfer line right now. If yours happens to be a newer sheet, you might have a lot more graphite on the back side than what I have on mine. And you very well could get a little extra line here and there, depending upon the pressure that you might have as you're holding it down in place with the pattern on top and the lines that you're creating. What I like to do with a brand new sheet of graphite paper is take that new sheet of paper with the graphite side up, put a piece of paper towel over on top of it. I'll get a piece here. And I really kind of wipe off some of that graphite, kind of wipe away some of that extra transfer. And you can see I've even picked some up now, even on my well-used, well-loved piece, there's still graphite on there. So a brand new sheet, as you can imagine, is going to have a lot more than my well-loved sheet here. So it could be that you might want to just remove some of that graphite by rubbing it onto a paper towel. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah,
and
thank you.
Yeah, that should make your transfer a little bit lighter, and I think you should be able to move on from there. Okay, so once we have our pattern in place, I'm going to keep this one here side by side so you can see everything. Let's go ahead and begin getting some paint out onto our palette. The first color I'm going to pull out is, and by the way, I'm using FolkArt Multi-Surface Paints. By multi-surface, let's see if I can show you the cap here. Oops, let me turn it a little bit. You can see that there's a little wine stem and a tin pail and a wood birdhouse. This is, you can find on some of the cap lids. This indicates that this is a formula that works on a multitude of surfaces. It works on wood, on tin, on glass, on terracotta, on stretched canvas, on note cards, so many, many different surfaces. This is a beautiful, rich, creamy consistency paint. You can see the little dollop that I put out on my palette. Let me bring it up closer so you can see that too. It's very full in body and texture. Let me turn it on its side so you can see. It's not going to move. It's beautifully rich, creamy consistency paint. And the color that I just poured out is acorn brown. So if you don't have acorn brown, just a nice honey colored brown paint will work. You can see here on my sample up close, it's not a really dark brown. It's not quite a chocolate brown. And what I'm saying is it's this color here. It's almost kind of a light golden honey color brown that I put out on my palette. Okay. So that's the first color that we're going to put on our reindeer. And we're also going to use that for this little border trim too. I'm going to start with a larger flat brush. This one that I have right now is a number 12. And I have a brush basin of water here off to the side. I'm going to get the bristles wet. And then what I'm going to do is touch my palette. I want to, or touch my paper towel to remove a little bit of that moisture, but I still want to leave wetness in the brush itself. I don't want to remove all of that. Just a minute. Okay, I was looking at a message there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep that brush so that the bristles are flat on my palette, and I'm going to stroke up into this beautiful brown color. You can see the moisture in my brush is kind of thinning some of that paint. So let me pull it down a little bit so that you can see it's becoming almost a little bit transparent and almost like a watercolor effect. With the side of the brush that has the paint in it, I'm going to hold that side next to my pattern line. I'm going to hold it up so maybe you can see a little bit here. And we are going to start maybe from ear to ear across the top of his head. Those of you that are painting along with me, we're just going to go and put a little bit of wash of color. This is not painting it in solid. We're using the water in our brush to kind of give us like a watercolor effect. And you're just going to follow the outline shape of our little Rudolph reindeer head. Can you all see what I'm doing? And I'm going to go around the whole head, keeping most of that color right on that pattern line. And don't worry, this is not the last we're going to do with this head, but we're going to give him just a little bit of color. And it's almost kind of watercolor towards the center and darker towards the outside pattern. Almost kind of looks like a pear shape right now. I'm going to put a little bit of color in the middle so that we don't have that ridge of color now. So now Rudolph's face is all in this light brown color, which is, I think I said acorn brown. It's really coffee latte. I'm sorry. It's coffee latte that we're working with. While we're still working with that thinned coffee latte, let's not forget that a little bit of his body is showing. So we're going to just come down. And if you've transferred Rudolph, like I have, it's going to be okay. We're just going to go right over it. What we're going to do now is just kind of come down on the sides of his body. If you find that it's dragging a little bit, wet your brush just a little bit more and touch the paper towel. I'm going to do the same thing on this side. Basically, what you could see what I'm doing is I have a thin consistency paint and I'm putting more color towards the outside of the pattern lines, less color towards the center. And we're going to let that dry before we come back. There is some darkness on the top of his head and some darkness at the neckline here, but we're going to worry about that after we get some of this color on and allow this to dry. So continuing along with this same brush and the same paint, same consistency, we're now going to work on the two ears that you see here. And I'm just going to go across the ear right where it touches the head. I'm going to get a little bit more paint on my brush. So I'm coming up right along from the top part of the ear and right where it meets the head. Does that make sense? I hope so. And now I'm going to take that brush along the bottom of that ear, going out to the tip of the ear. And we're going to do the same thing on the other side. So I'm going to go across the ear, along the side of the face, and then I'm going to pull that color out on the base of the ear up towards the tip. All this time I'm doing this, I am keeping the side of my brush that has the paint in it right up next to the pattern lines. Very, very simple. And we're going to kind of let that set up a minute. I think our head might be a little bit dry, ready to reinforce some of that color. As you are reloading your brush, you can see I'm just sneaking a tiny corner of that flat brush into that pile of paint, and I'm pulling some out, so that I'm always keeping the brush so that there's paint on one side of that flat brush and the rest of it, there is no paint, but it's a lot of moisture from the water that we have in our brush basin here. So now I'm going to come across the top of the head. Mine's dry. I'm going to come across, make sure yours is dry before you repeat this second step. So if you have a hairdryer nearby, go ahead and hit Rudolph with the hairdryer. If you did not allow this to dry first, what will happen is you could very well pick up the color from the second go around. So you can see I added a little bit more of our coffee latte right along the top of his head. And again, I'm still keeping the side of my brush that has more paint in it next to the outside of his head. And we're kind of giving this more of maybe a watercolor effect. I'm going to continue on, still adding a little bit more of my brown color. Again, this is coffee latte. And this time I want to add a little bit of shading on this part right here, which would be his neck. And I'm just going to go from one side to the other side. As I'm pulling this color on, I want to make sure my brush is on the right side. The dark side of my brush is going to be right up next to his chin line or at the base of his head. I'm actually kind of patting. I'm going to pull this up so you can see. I'm actually kind of patting the color on rather than doing one long smooth stroke. Okay. So I'm going to load my brush again. There's moisture in my brush because I did wet it. I blotted it on the paper towel. Now I'm coming over. I'm getting just a tiny corner of that coffee latte. And now I'm coming back here and I'm patting that color on. So you can see now we're starting to make it a little bit deeper along this chin line or along the base of his neck. So we just want to add a little bit more shading there. And you can even bring some of that down along the sides here if you want. Any questions yet, John?
No, I think so far we're doing okay.
Okay.
People getting their settings right on their screen and all that kind of stuff, but generally speaking, we're doing all right.
Okay, good. I'm going to go over the base of the ears one more time, just to kind of make the bottom side of the ear a little bit darker. So I'm just kind of repeating that step. And then now at this time, I'm also going to come back and do the top of the ear. The top of the ears are lighter in value than the base or the bottom of each of the ears. So we're just going to go over them one time. All right. Now, while we have this color going on, we can also at this point in time, go ahead and put just a little base of color along this border area all the way around. So keep the side of the brush that has the paint in it, this coffee latte, right up next to your pattern line. So it'll be a little bit darker towards the inside here. So if you've penciled in the lines or if you've transferred your lines using the graphite paper, you're just going to, again, kind of pat, pat, pat that color on, keeping the brush that has the side of the brush that has the paint in it right up next to those pattern lines. If you need to add a little bit more moisture, touch your bristles of the brush into the brush basin with a little bit more water. That water is helping to thin that paint down to kind of give us more like a watercolor effect.
Chris,
we don't want it. Yes.
Can you move the finished painting off a little bit over to the side? Because when you're painting, you're covering it up. And so people like to see both at the same time.
How about here with this? If I, oh, no, that's not going to work.
Maybe off,
how about like that?
Maybe, yeah, to the left.
I'm trying to paint up close so that people can see what I'm painting. And maybe this is better then. Is that
there
okay?
You go.
Yeah, let me know if I'm blocking it. I don't want to block it. I think because of the way our cameras are, sometimes it's hard for people to see if I were to paint down here, which would be easy for me to see.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to make it easy for everyone else to see on the cameras.
Yeah, maybe just shift yourself over to the right a touch and then there we go.
There we go. Okay. Thank you for that, John.
Sure.
Okay, so just continue on. Now that we probably have our camera angles right, I'm just going to continue on and darken this little border along the pattern line. And if you were doing this at home, you can even take this color and go the sides of your canvas. I'm not going to take the time to do that now, but it's the same technique with a watered down, like watercolor consistency coffee latte on the edges. But right now I'm only going to do the top because we will paint over on top of this border. And I just want to have this part dry before we get ready to put our little leaf garland on. So I hope that makes sense. Right now, we're just doing the top of the canvas. If we have time yet tonight, you can do the sides, but obviously you know how to do this now. So if you can even finish the sides. Unless, of course, you're going to put this in a frame. If you're putting it in a frame, then you might not need to do that. So let me hold up mine so you can see I've kind of got, just to refresh where we are at this point, we used a number 12 flat brush. We're using coffee latte. We're getting our brush wet, lots of moisture in that bristles of the brush, just lightly blotting it here, not a lot because I still want to keep moisture in my brush. And we're just brushing along the little puddle of color so that I'm adding paint just on one corner of that brush. And you can see how juicy it is. There's still a lot of water in that brush. Then what we did was we went around all the pattern line of the face of Rudolph. We went across the ears where they met the head, down the bottom, and we also did his body here. Then we came back with a second coat to reinforce a little bit more dark shading. And I'm going to do that one more time. So I'm going to still work with the coffee latte. We're going to go back up to the top of his head. Again, I'm just kind of patting that color on. And you can see I'm darkening that top of his head just a little bit more. And we'll do that at the base of his neck here for his body. And bring it down on the sides, just kind of blend in a little bit. And then we're going to do it also on the ears and across the bottom of the ears. We just wanted it to be a little bit darker, and we just do it incrementally, a little bit at a time, and allowing each little section to dry before we move on to the next section. All right, now what we're going to do is go ahead and rinse that brush and set it aside. I'm going to move now to a liner brush.
Hey, Chris, just real quick. So somebody was asking, the paint, if the paint comes out really pretty thick and clumpy onto the palette, how should they handle that?
If it comes out thick, you kind of came in and out, John?
Oh, somebody said, what do I do if my paint is thick and clumpy? So maybe they need to give it a stir before
it could be
swapping it out, or
usually FolkArt Multi-Surface is not clumpy. It is thick. You can see just based on looking at mine here, these I just poured them out straight from the bottle, and this has not self-leveled. These are nice, thick, rich, creamy paints.
Okay.
If that helps. I don't know about the clumpy part. It should be creamy and it should be thick in consistency. But yeah, if yours is really, really clumpy, it could be that maybe air has gotten into your bottle, and you might want to just kind of stir it up a little bit. Okay, so now what we've got is I just added 2 more colors out on my palette, and I added the black that we're going to work with, and that is Licorice. And I also added the red that we're going to work with, and the red is Apple Red. So we're going to begin first. I want to make sure his face is dry. Make sure the face area is dry before we do any of these 2 colors. Mine is dry, so I'm going to move on. And I'm going to switch to a little bit smaller flat brush, not too small though, because it's a number 8. And what I'm going to do with this is we're going to put our cheeks in and our nose in, and then we'll do our eyes. So to do the cheeks, again, I touched my water. Let me move this back into view. I'm going to touch my paper towel, still want a lot of moisture in my brush. I'm going to scoot, just like we've done, scoot just a tip of that brush into our little apple red. And what I'm going to do now is we're going to kind of dance that brush on in a kind of a circular motion to give him his rosy cheeks. And I'm going to hold my brush. Now let's watch this. I put my brush into the puddle here. So as I'm looking at mine, the left side of my brush is where I've got the color, more color. So I'm going to hold that side up. Okay. I'm not going to put that side on Rudolph. The side that's going to touch my canvas is the side that has just the water. So I kept my brush flat. I loaded it with some of our red. It is a thinner consistency. The side that has my paint is what I turned up towards the ceiling. The side that has the water is pointing down. And now what I'm going to do is with that brush straight up and down, I'm going to kind of go at an angle now to where just a tip is going to hit I'm going to do it on the palette first before I do it on Rudolph. And I'm just going to touch and do a tapping motion like this. And that's how we're going to get our, oh, you don't even see that. We're so far away and it's such a small detail. Let me do it on Rudolph and maybe you can see better. Okay, so now what I'm going to do, keeping him over, I'm going to hold that side of the brush. Like I said, the paint side is straight up. And I have my nose blank kind of here, so I can see my cheeks need to be on either side of the nose. And I'm going to hold it up real close so you can see my nose is there. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to tap. So you can see that there's very little color coming off onto my little cheek. If I want it a little bit rosier, pick up a little bit more paint on the palette. Again, it's just kind of tapping that color on, and I'm kind of tapping it in an irregular shaped circle. And we're going to let that kind of dry. You can come back and reinforce that color if you want pinker cheeks or rosier cheeks. So I'm going to do the same thing again. Again, my brush is so that the flat side of the brush is upright now, if that makes sense. I've got the red pointing towards the ceiling, the water pointing down, and I am just tapping. And of course, obviously, we want to make our cheeks about the same size. So let me work on this one a little bit more. He needs to be the same side cheek on both sides. Now, this is too pale of a cheek for me. I love rosy cheeks when it comes to painting Santas and Christmas little elves, and of course our Rudolph today. So we're going to let this dry, kind of like we did the rest of his body. We're going to work on layers. So we'll come back and we'll blush his cheeks one more time again. But while we're waiting for that to dry and set up, we can go ahead and fill in using the chisel edge of the brush a little bit of that triangular shaped nose, because Rudolph has a red nose, right? We all know that. And right now I'm just kind of getting a base of that pinky color, and we're going to let that dry. We'll darken that as well. And when we darken that, we'll be darkening the left side of the nose. I'm going to just make sure that's a little bit rounded there on the edges. Okay. While we're working with the red and this brush that's loaded with red, we have two ornaments, one in the upper right corner, one in the lower left middle here. Those are both have red areas. So this one up here that's kind of like just an egg shape, let's go ahead and put red on there. And I'm going to hold the brush so that the part that has the color in it, the most of the paint is going to be on the left and bottom. So you can see here, left and bottom is where I'm kind of putting that red. And I'm kind of, the rest of it's more of a pink wash right now because of the red. We're going to let that dry because we can come back and intensify that if you want. And then on the second ornament that has red, same kind of thing. We have like an egg shape here. We're going to put the color again on the left and the bottom. And lightly pink on the rest of it. And then there's a little dangle part that's almost like a little light bulb shape. And that one too is going to get the red on it. All right. Now I think my cheeks might be ready to go back, and I can put a second coat on my cheeks. Remember what I said though, your areas that you've done this kind of watercolor wash on do need to be dry before you attempt to put any more color on them. I can see my nose is still wet, but my cheeks are dry. I'm going to repeat the same process. I've loaded paint on just a corner of my brush, but I'm holding it now up so that the red is towards the ceiling, and I'm simply tapping and dabbing. And you can see as I'm doing that, how much more intense that rosy cheek is getting. Just tap that color on and tap the color on the second cheek. And again, try and make your cheeks about the same size and the same amount of color intensity. If that's not pink enough for you, you can let this dry and come back and give them another coat of pink. While we have this same brush, I'm going to wet mine again, blot it on the paper towel, reload it. We're going to intensify his nose now. Remember I said on the nose, the part that's going to be mostly red will be this part here, if you're looking at it. This is what I'm thinking of from the top around that rounded corner and then down to the point. So it's going to be more on the left side of the nose is where you're going to see more red. So as you hold your brush, the part that has the red in it should be the closest to the left side of his nose. And we're just going to let that go. And again, if you want more red to his nose, you can always add more red as you let this dry and then reload it. Okay. While we're waiting for that to dry, let's go ahead and get some of our bright yellow green color out. This is citrus green. And we have one small little ornament in the upper left corner. It's just a little round bulb. We can use that same brush, same technique, wet your brush, blot it on the paper towel, sneak a corner of, I'm sorry, John.
Nope.
Oh, okay. I
Nope.
thought you said something. Sneak a corner into the yellow citron. And now we're going to do the same thing. We're going to load the side of the ornament or the little round bulb on the left side with most of the color. And it's just going to be a color wash to the light side, to the right side. So we're just giving that a little wash of some of the green color. Now I'm going to add, oh, let's see, I did add black. We're going to add black to your palette. This is Licorice. And what I'm going to do with the black now is I'm going to switch and use a liner brush. I'm using a #1 liner. If you prefer to use a #2 liner, I want you to use what's most comfortable for you. I dipped my brush in water in the brush basin. I brought that wet brush without blotting it on my paper towel. This time I brought it over to my palette, and you can see I've thinned down a puddle of that black. I brought some of that licorice color out to where the water was, and I'm really working it into the bristles of the brush, thinning it down so that I now have a more fluid consistency black paint. And what we're going to do with this is we're going to go ahead and paint the 2 ovals of his eyes. And this, I'm sorry, I'm going to have close to me so that I can see them. Let me tell you, as you're painting your eyes can be kind of funny. Obviously, we're seeing both eyes face on. We want to make sure that both of your eyes are the same size and same shape. If you paint eyes and all of a sudden one looks crazy, a little wonky, one size looks different than the other, but you can't really tell what's 100% wrong with them. A good trick is to take your piece, turn it upside down to you, and then look at it. A lot of times upside down, you can see where your mistake is, or where you maybe need to make one side a little bit bigger, one side a little more rounded, one side a little oval. If that doesn't work for you, keep your piece down and get your cell phone out and take a picture using your cell phone. When you look at the picture on your cell phone, you will sometimes be able to automatically see. It's kind of a trickery of your eye, but looking at it through a cell phone, you can definitely see then where the mistake is that your eye might be slightly off. One more thing is to take it to your bathroom and hold it up in front of a mirror and look at the reflection in the mirror. And that's another way. 3 great tips for you there for fixing eyes if you feel like one eye is slightly off kilter. Okay, so while we have our liner brush with our thinned consistency black paint, let's just go ahead and begin. We're going to let that part dry before we add any more to it. If you look at Rudolph here, everywhere around all of his shape, there is a very wiggly line. It's kind of adding that whimsy. You can use oftentimes people say, well, can I use a marker? Yes, you can use a permanent fine point marker, but just make sure it is permanent. Because if you were to brush a varnish on or seal this with a spray sealer, sometimes if it's a water-based marker, your marker lines may bleed. So yes, you can use a fine point marker, but you know what, y'all? We are artists and we need to learn how to use our liner brushes. So I'm going to get off my soapbox because I am using my liner brush. And what I'm going to do right now, just starting up here on the ear, the inner part of the ear. And you know what, if any of you have like a slight little tremor or a palsy, this is the best thing for you because I'm not doing very long, smooth strokes. I am outlining using a very wiggly line because I want more of a whimsy look to our little Rudolph here. I'm using just the tip of the brush, and you can see that I have really thinned that paint down. Every so often I will stop and refill my brush with more paint, and I'm holding my brush so that just the tip of the brush, I'm holding it almost straight up and down, but I'm holding it at an angle now so you can see. I'm holding it straight up and down to the surface, and as I move along, I'm using just very light pressure, and I'm kind of letting it be a wiggly line. Like I said, don't worry about it being an exact line. And this can be done very, very quickly. Don't labor over this because like I said, this is whimsy. We're not going to worry about being totally exact tonight. We've done that on other classes, but tonight it's all about the whimsy. So we're just going to outline our little Rudolph. Don't forget, after you do his head, we've got to connect his body. And again, it's just a short, I'm going to do one up here real close for you. The tip of my brush is touching the canvas and I'm just pulling very light pressure and a more of a wiggly line. So we've outlined the inner ear, the outer ear pattern lines, the pear-shaped head, and then we've connected his head to his body by adding the wiggly lines on the outside edge there. He's got antlers that are wiggly, and we can do the antlers first with our coffee latte. So I'm thinning out the black, washing it on my brush, and now I'm going to bring some water filled brush to our first color that we worked with, which was that real pretty brown color. And I'm going to thin down a puddle of that brown that again is coffee latte. And we're going to still work with that same liner brush. And his antler lines are very much like what we just did. They are like we did the black kind of wispy, wiggly lines here. His little lines for his antlers are the exact same thing. So we're just going to touch and pull up and then stop. And his antler lines are just a combination in different directions of short little wiggly lines. And they're kind of like every so often there's like an intersection or a V or a Y. One kind of line flows from another. Almost like tree branches, if you think about it that way. And I'm going to have maybe, I think that's good. Maybe I'll make this one a little bit longer. Okay. And then we'll do the same thing for the second set of antlers. And you'll notice as I'm painting, I am turning my work every so often so that I hope you're being able to see it, but then it also makes it easier for me to see. And a lot of times think about how you like to paint. Everyone will find their comfort zone. Some people like to pull like towards them, like start here and pull towards me. Some people pull off to the side. I like to pull off to the side because then I can see where it is that I'm going, where my brush is taking me. So now we have our antlers all in with the coffee latte that has been thinned. They're wiggly jiggly lines. And now I'm going to go ahead and go back to my black. I didn't really clean my brush because that black is going to overtake the coffee latte that's in my bristles of my brush. And I'm going to hold this up one. Here's my sample one more time if you want to look. So now we're just going to repeat that pattern, just doing the small, fine black lines on top of the coffee latte lines that we did already. So it's okay to let some of that brown to show through, and it's okay to have a little bit of a black interest. So here's two that I just did on mine. So I didn't completely overlap them. There is a little bit of a gap so I can still see that coffee latte. I hope y'all are having fun. This is really such a simple, easy project. So like the greeting card that I showed you earlier, because this goes so quickly, once you really know what you're doing, you can do several greeting cards all in an assembly line fashion in no time at all. The key thing is I'm sorry, go ahead, John.
Everyone's having fun. They're all chiming in about how good the directions are and relaxing and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, great. Well, thank you.
Can you give the finished one a close up for a minute? I think a couple people wanted a reference just to see. Maybe not that close.
Okay, sorry.
Too close. There we go.
Sorry.
Yep, that's it. Right there.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So now I think we can, if you've got your antlers on like I do, and we've done them both with the coffee latte and the black or the licorice, we need to move back to his face because his face is missing some detail, right? If you look over here, his face has that same black outline of the wiggly line around his nose. Here, I'll hold it up so you can see. Look at his nose. He's got two little marks above his eyes that are kind of like his inquisitive eyebrows. And then we have a line that comes down from the bottom triangle of his nose, and then two little curves up to kind of create his little mouth area. So that's what we'll do next. So where I'm going to use that liner brush, still loaded with that very thin black paint. And again, just kind of think about rounded corner triangle here when you're putting in his nose. Rounded corner, you don't make any straight lines. There's my nose. And then following the pattern line there, or just go straight down in the middle and then curve up to the right. And you're going to do the same thing, curving up to the left to kind of give him his little mouth. And then his eyebrows, you can make them equal on both sides, but I kind of made mine more fun and whimsical. One is higher and the other one is a little bit lower. And what I did was I just touched and pulled. Just touch the tip of your bristles where you want that eyebrow and then pull and lift all at the same time. Okay. And now what we want to do is we want to attach these, oops, I missed one little part here. Let's go back with a smaller brush. I just picked up a number 2 brush. This ornament right here, the one that is a 2-section ornament, there's actually a connector little piece in the middle, and that is just nothing but our citrus green, almost like a little square of citrus green in the middle of the 2. So I just added a little bit of citrus green using a number 2 flat brush. If you don't have a brush that small, then you can obviously switch and use your liner brush. So now our ornaments are all colored in. If you want them a little bit more intense or dark, we can do that in a minute. But while we have this brush ready, I think it's a good time now to connect our ornaments to his antlers. If you've noticed in my sample here, the ornaments are kind of hanging like a tree, but they're hanging from his antlers. So again, this is just black line work, kind of very wiggly. You can make a loop. I'm showing you up close. If you're not looking, you can look here. There's a little loop onto one of the antler pieces, and then it just kind of wiggles down and it connects with what we're going to say is the top of the ornament. So I'm going to work on this one here on the corner, and I'm going to make that loop first. Again, I'm still working with the liner brush and my thinned black paint. As I pull down to the ornament, I kind of made like a little wiggly line. And now I'm going to outline that. At the top of each ornament, there is a little square, like the little ornament top. And I'm going to kind of pull that around, again, just using the tip of my brush to outline that ornament. And there's that one ornament. We'll do the next on this long one hanging down. I'm going to again make a loop like it's hanging on for dear life off of that little section of the antler. And we're going to pull that line down, again, kind of wiggly, jiggly, all the way down to the ornament. Make a little square at the top of the ornament for the ornament topper. Black wiggly jiggly line around the egg shape, the first section of that ornament. We're going to bring it down the sides of the green that we just added. And around that bottom piece that was, we kind of said was almost like a little light bulb shape. All right. Now this one up here, he was actually hanging off of this one. I shortened it, so I'm going to make him hang off of this top one. So we'll do the same thing up here. I'm going to make a little loop. I'm hoping, oops, maybe that's too tilted. And then I'm going to do a wiggly jiggly line down to the ornament, give myself a little square topper, and then outline that ornament. Okay, is everybody with me? We've outlined our ornaments. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to, I think we'll go ahead and do our red lines. So what I'm going to do is with my apple red, I'm going to clean out first my brush from all the black that we've been working with, blot it on the paper towel, and then refill it with clean water and bring it over here to that red. And I'm going to pull that red puddle out. And I do want to thin the paint, but I still want a lot of pigment in it. I want it to be red versus like a pink because of the water. So we're going to fill our brush with a thinned red consistency. And again, this red color that I'm working with is apple red. It's my favorite Christmas red color. It's just a beautiful, beautiful color. Now, as I'm going to bring this back up to you, you can see that each of our little ornaments have like a little red bow. It's like there's a double looped bow and then little streamer ribbon ends. Here's this one. You can see double loop bow. So this is so simply done. What we're going to do is we're going to start with our brush straight up and down, and we're going to make one loop. Then we come in here and make a second loop. Two loops to, oh, you probably can't even see that. Sorry. Let me pull it back up. I can pull my palette up. So there's two loops. Once we do two loops on one side, we're going to repeat and do two loops on the second side. And just let those loops kind of overlap one another. All right. And then just bring a little tail down and make your tail kind of wiggly and jiggly. And that's all there is at the top of each of our three ornaments. I hope that makes sense to y'all. So we're going to take the apple red that's thinned. We have our number one liner brush. And at the top of each of our little ornaments, we're going to make our little double loop bow, one loop, a second loop, and a little wiggly tail. All right. Double loop, and a little tail. And one more on your third ornament, whichever ornament you're starting with. This is such a simple little project. Basically, it's a good lesson, though, on working with your liner brush and the consistency of paints. All right. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get out a little bit of white. The white I'm working with is titanium white. If you don't have that and you have wicker white, either white is good. And I want to put a little highlight in each of my ornaments. So I'm filling that liner brush with the paint, not thin down. I want body this time. So I'm using the thick, rich consistency of the wicker white. And I'm just going to, if I'm looking at my ornament here, if you think about that as the face of a clock, think about 1 o'clock. So at 1 o'clock, I'm going to touch, down, pull, lift. Can you see that little bit of a highlight? And I'm going to do that on each of the other two ornaments. Touch, pull, lift at 1 o'clock. And touch, pull, lift at 1 o'clock. Okay? And then what I'm going to do is I am going to, on this bottom one here, with just a little bit less white paint, add a little highlight on that little red one too. All right. Now, while I still have the white paint in my brush, I'm going to do the highlights in his eyes. And again, if we think about the face of a clock, we're going to touch down at 1 o'clock on both eyes and touch, pull, lift, just like we did the highlights on your bulbs. Touch, pull, lift, touch, pull, lift. And the highlights at 1 o'clock are both the same size. They're going in the same direction. They're both equal, if that makes sense. Then what we want to do is we want to take just the tip of your brush and go diagonally down from that. So it'll be like 7 o'clock on the face of a clock, and we're just going to make a dot. 7 o'clock, we're going to make a dot. So there's two highlights in his eyes. The upper highlight, like I said, it's about 1 o'clock, is a touch, pull, lift. The one diagonally down from it, like at 7 o'clock, is just two tiny little dots. All right. Now let's go move on to the little border around here. And the border is very, very simple. I just used, let me get a darker green out on my palette. This is Thicket that I'm going to work with now. So now we have a dark green, which is Thicket, and we have a lighter green, which is citrus green out on our palette. And I'm just going to start with the darker green first. This is the Thicket, and I'm going to still work with my liner brush. I'm going to bring some of that water over here just to pull it out. Not quite as soupy as we've been working with, but we do want it a little bit more fluid. And with this dark licorice, I'm going to do kind of a wavy line. I'll probably start in the corner So I'm going to turn mine upside down, starting in the bottom corner. And I'm just going to take my brush straight up and down, and I'm going to make almost like a snaky line like this. Okay. And you're going to bring it right up on, let it go in overlapping. Let me bring it up so you can see here. Underneath all of the ribbon and the leaves, there is like a little vine that just snakes along. You can bring it up as high as you want or as low as you want on your sample. So when you're looking at it right hand, we're going to go up this side here, and then we're going to go over. We're going to repeat that on this side. We're going to go up the side, and then we're going to go over with this dark green snaky line. And you can make your border as tall as you want or as short as you want. If you're trying to base it on mine, it's almost at ear height on both sides. So I'm going to turn mine upside down so that I can pull towards me. Again, I've got this liner brush filled with the thin, more fluid Thicket. If you don't have Thicket, sap green is another good color that you can use. And I'm just snaking along. Some of my snake falls on the border. Some of my little snake falls on the canvas itself. And now I'm going to bring it in the other direction. So we're kind of creating like an L shape.
Hey, Chris, while you're pausing there, Joe was asking what color is the background? You didn't paint the background other than just left the canvas, right? Natural?
That is correct. And Joe, I did if you're talking about this right here, I did not paint mine because we only have an hour in class. If you were doing this again at home, you might even just paint it white or an off-white or a cream color and then transfer your pattern. Because we only have an hour in our Michael's classes, and I wanted to get into all of the detail that it takes to paint Rudolph, I chose not to paint this. So my background that you're seeing here is just like the white of the canvas.
There we
Same
go.
thing if you're doing a note card, Joe, it's just the blank white of the paper. Okay. If you want to paint this again at home, by all means, you can put whatever color background you want on yours. But I, for tonight's time's sake, did not do that. Okay. So now we've got our little snaky lines that are the dark green. And I'm going to switch to that number 2 flat brush, but you could also still use your liner brush, whichever you have. I'm going to fill that brush with the dark green. And we're going to paint some little leaves here on either side of our little snaky line that we did. I'm bringing mine up, my finished one up here. And you can see some of your leaves are going to be dark green and some of our leaves are going to be more this yellowy green, the citrus green color. So just here and there amongst the actual, it's just a smash, pull, and lift. And I'm kind of putting smash, pull, lift, smash, pull, lift. So I'm just adding some green leaves, not worrying too much about brush strokes or shape. I'm just kind of touching down. I'm going to see if I can do one up here close. I'm just kind of touching down, and you can see the pressure, smashing it and then lifting it. Okay. So now is where you want to go ahead and just add some of these dark green leaves here and there, all the way around that little vine shape. And you'll do it on both sides. And it's just a smash and go. It's not a very technical thing, but it's something that anybody can do. All right. So add your dark green leaves next. I'm using a number 2 flat brush. If you don't have one, then obviously your liner brush will still work. I'm just smashing that brush down to get the width or the base of the leaf stroke. And then I'm pulling and lifting very quick because these are short little leaves. If you don't pull up quick enough, then you're going to have a longer leaf. All right, now what I'm doing is wiping off that dark green because I've got the leaves on both sides of my little garland or my little vine. And now we want to, I did not clean my brush. I just wiped off the dark green on my palette or on my paper towel. Now we're going to get that citrus green. And here and there where you feel like you need another leaf, add a little bit of that bright yellow-green leaf so that they kind of intermix, and you're going to get light leaves and dark leaves. Same technique, you're fully loading that brush. We're not thinning with water this time. We're using the full consistency of the paint. And I'm adding a little bit of leaves here and there. And sometimes if you don't think about it and you're just kind of smashing and lifting very quickly, it goes along a lot faster and your leaves actually look pretty cute. So don't dwell on this. I'm not worried about brush strokes right now. We're just worried about getting some of that color on to kind of give it both dark green and light green little leaves. Okay. All right. The next thing we're going to do, we're going to go back to that liner brush and we're going to get some more moisture in it. And we're going to bring that back over. If your red is not as soupy, you're going to re-soupify. Yes, that is a word. We're going to make that red a little bit more fluid again. That's the liner brush, and the red is apple red. We've used some water to kind of thin it down a little bit, make it more soupy or more fluid. And remember how we did our double looped bows here? Our garland has a double loop bow that starts in the base here and then just kind of trails up through our vine and then trails out. So we're kind of making that L shape on this side. So our two bottom corners have got the double looped bows. One tail kind of goes across the bottom, one tail kind of goes up the side. And that's all we're going to do there. So with that thinned apple red, the same thing we did with our double looped bows, just start in one corner. I'm going to hold it this way, maybe so you can see. And I'm just going to do a loop, another loop, repeat that for the other half of the bow, a loop, another loop, and then let that kind of ribbon flow in and out of your garland that you just painted. And then bring some up the sides as well. And on the ribbon, you can touch and apply pressure here and there and leave it light in between so that some of your ribbon is a little bit thicker than other areas. Buenos Aires. Oh, Estella, hi, how are you? So glad that you were able to tune in tonight. Thank you for joining us. Okay, so I'm going to repeat that again on this side. I'm going to make a loop, a double loop, make another loop, another double loop, and then I'm going to bring those tails up and intertwine that ribbon through the garland that we just painted. And same thing on this side. Okay. Now, Rudolph has a name, and you can either paint the Rudolph in or you can leave it out. On my sample here and on your pattern, I gave you the lettering here if you want to put his name in here. Sometimes people are afraid of lettering and they'd rather not. Sometimes people often ask, can I go back to using my marker? Yes, you can do that too, whichever is more comfortable for you. The thing I caution you again is just to make sure that this is completely dry here if you are in fact going to use your marker. I'm going to paint mine out and I'm going to use my liner brush and I'm going to thin down that black paint. Again, mine is Licorice, and I'm going to thin it down to a very fluid, inky consistency. I do have my pattern on here underneath, but I can barely see it anymore. And what I'm going to do is just go ahead and paint the word Rudolph. And I'm just going to, on my downward strokes, put a little bit more pressure so they're a little bit fatter. And I'm going to have to paint this so that I can see it. I'm afraid I can't hold it up to paint it for you because then I won't be able to see what I'm doing. So I've RUD. O. Watch me misspell this. L. P. And bring it up for an H. Rudolph.
Nice.
Okay, so there's my Rudolph. And one thing we won't want to do while we still have our liner brush and this thin fluid consistency black, I'm going to show you on my finished sample up here. I connected the background canvas to the painted border that we did in the very, very beginning and made that nice black wiggly line. Again, not a straight line, showing you mine up close. You can see how wiggly and freeform and whimsy my line is as you add that border. So go ahead and now outline that little area where your coffee latte mat, if you will, or border meets the white of the canvas. And again, it's just the very tip of your liner brush. Very, very spontaneous, very whimsy, very fluid, jiggity lines. They don't even have to be solid. They could even be a little start and stop line here and there, kind of a hit or miss or skipping along. And then if you still see some of that border line in between where we painted our garland, add a few black lines in between there to kind of show the separation lines. I have covered up a lot of mine, so I don't have as many spare areas, but if you do see a little border line where the coffee latte meets the blank of the canvas, go ahead and add a little black there too. One more thing we're going to do to our Rudolph, and then I'm going to talk to you about a little bit of an extra detail that you could add if you want to. I added little black, sorry, not black. I added little red berries in my garland here, and you can use either the tip of your liner brush, or you can use a stylus as a dotting tool. And if you're not familiar with this, this is a stylus that we use to transfer the pattern. Mine is a double-ended one, so there's a bigger dot on one side and a smaller dot on the other. Let me, here, let me show you. So I showed you up here. This has the small dot size, and then when I flip it over, this has a bigger dot size. So you can use a artist stylus as a dotting tool too. So you're going to dip into your red, and all we're going to do is add a dot. Very, very simple. And my little dots, some of them are just single dots by themselves. Some of them are pairs of dots, little holly berries, if you will. Some of them are 3 dots in a row or in a triangle shape. So you're just going to add some dimensional red dots throughout your little garland that you've painted. You don't need a lot, but a few here and there. And you're going to do both sides of your garland. And again, like I said, you could use your liner brush and you can use the bristle end, but this is just such a great little cheat. And especially if you're working with children too, this is a nice little way that they can add polka dots to lots of things that they like to paint. I would suggest not making every single little berry in the triangular shape. Some can be just, like I said, pairs of dots, and some could be individual single dots. And here are my little berries in my little garland, if you want to take a look. And basically, this is kind of like the end of our Rudolph, but I'm going to show you my finished sample here. I did add just a little bit of pizzazz to mine. If you look closely at the top of each ornament, I'm going to share with you that that little square that was our ornament cap, if you will. And I don't know if it's going to show here. I'm trying to get you to see. I've got metallic glitter on there. Can you see the gold glitter on this one a little bit? There, now there's a little bit of a shine. I used a great paint that you can either use the Treasure Gold Gold, or you can use the FolkArt Multi-Surface Paint that is the chunky gold color. And I used this chunky gold because I wanted a little bit more glitter effect. And I just used my liner brush. It takes so little because it's just a small little square, but I added just a tip of that chunky glitter on the little ornament caps. And right now it's kind of a milky white in color, but it does dry to that gold luscious glitter and it's so pretty. This was not on your supply list because I kind of added this at the last minute, and it's not something you have to do, but it just gives our little caps of our ornaments something more to look at. And that basically is our lesson for tonight, our little Rudolph. I hope you've enjoyed it. Any questions, John?
Yeah, there was just a couple
Okay.
having to do with patterns. Someone had asked, how do you store and keep all your patterns and tracings? Do you have like a filing system for that, or?
I do. I actually use file folders for mine at home, and I have one folder for a subject matter. So if we're painting holiday things, I might have a folder just for my Santa Claus patterns, and one just for where I've drawn snowman patterns, and maybe one for other holiday like the reindeer. If you're doing everyday patterns and not necessarily holiday patterns, you might think about one for florals and one for vegetables. Or if you have a lot of one particular flower, maybe it's one that's just roses. But I kind of store mine all in file folders. And I keep my tracing, this tracing paper pattern, I keep mine all the time. Sometimes I will even make notes off to the side, like what colors I used, so that if by chance you lose the printed out pattern from tonight's class, you'll always have your tracing, and you'll always have the supply list on there in case you ever want to repeat it again.
That's a great idea. And then there was one other pattern related question, which was, how can you remove carbon lines from the pattern? I guess maybe it's similar to that other question about extra lines on your painting.
Yeah, let's say I wasn't able, these lines here on the Rudolph's antlers are so fine. And let's say as I did my little wiggly lines, I didn't completely cover up that artist transfer, that gray transfer paper.
Sure.
First and foremost, you want to let this completely dry. Don't try and do anything while all of that's wet, because obviously you don't want to smear your paint lines. But if you use a white vinyl eraser, that will definitely lift your graphite lines.
There you go. A nice little white eraser. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Joni said that her 10, 9, and 7-year-old had a blast. So that's always fun too, when there's children who paint along. We love that.
Yes. And Joni, please, please, please take a picture of your children's artwork. Do share it if you don't mind. Post it in our Let's Paint with Plaid Facebook group. If you're not a member, we welcome you to join us. It's a fabulous community of everyone of every skill level that enjoys painting. And post that picture. Use the hashtag Let's Paint Challenge. I cannot wait, and I would love to see your children's artwork as well as yours. Everyone should take a picture of what they've painted tonight and share it in our group. I am thrilled when anyone does that, and it's so fun to see everyone's interpretation of today's lesson. Anything else, John?
Yeah, so I just put in the group, it's the Let's Paint with Plaid Facebook group. I know that Michael's also likes to see your paintings, so you guys can hashtag make it with Michael's.
Yes.
You can hashtag Plaid Crafts. And then, so that's just in general, if you want to put your stuff on wherever channel that you have, use those. But then if you do go to the Let's Paint with Plaid Facebook group, that is a group that you can join. And I just put the name of it again in the chat. Once you're in there, I think that the folks in that group use the hashtag Let's Paint Challenge for the work that's posted in the group. But if you put it in the group, we'll see it. So.
Most definitely. I hope you all have had a great time with me tonight. I love teaching. I've been a teacher for many, many years. We teach in the Let's Paint with Plaid Facebook group. We teach occasionally here on the Michael's Community Classroom. And I love when I get to see my students work. So please do share your work. And I hope you've had a great time tonight. There is going to be another class. We take a break over the Christmas holidays. But Monday, January 3rd is when Plaid will be back in the Michael's Community Classroom. And I have that project here with me if you'd like to see what we're going to do.
Yeah, let's see it. You want to,
Jesse Panuski,
Chanel, switch us to the front view. Are you on the, yeah.
There we go.
We go.
Okay, so I would love to share with you our project that's going to be for that Monday night. Jesse Panuski here, part of our Let's Paint team, is going to be our lead teacher. And she's going to be doing this really fun project, and it's all about birch trees. So I hope you join us on January the 3rd at 8 p.m. with Jessie,
Ooh,
and you'll have a
cool.
great time with her learning how to paint these birch trees.
Yeah.
And so if you have any other questions, John, I'm here to help answer them.
I think
Okay.
we're good on questions,
Okay.
but that's going to be fun in a couple of weeks. And it's one of the great things about this classroom is that we have such a wide variety of the kinds of paintings that we do. I mean, what Chris teaches is so different from something like that Jessie's doing. And then Kirsten does a different thing altogether. And there's Andy and Emma. So
Right.
it's great to join us every week because you're going to learn so many different kinds of things. So yeah, I guess that's it, right?
Right. So I hope you all have enjoyed tonight's class, and I can't wait to see your whimsical Rudolphs as well. Be sure to, like I said, post them in our Facebook group and use the hashtag Make It With Michaels or Let's Paint Challenge. And we just want to wish everyone through this holiday season to have a wonderful, safe holiday. Enjoy your friends and your family, and maybe even some me time with a paintbrush in your hand, and enjoy painting over this holiday break.
Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.